Hello and welcome back. I'll start today's session with a thank you note. Thanks everyone who have watched the video, though the count is very less, it is not very big, but this is a start. I hope in future I'm going to make more videos on the technologies that I have worked like Java, Spring Boot, Python and data science. So more videos are going to come on this channel, and they would be like very easy to learn, would be very simple, as well as we'll also create some advanced topic videos also. Okay, coming back to the Laravel. In the last session, we had created up the account and sent the email to the user to verify the account. So user clicked on that email and he got the account verified. We also discussed like we will be using up the mailables, but I'm not going to continue with the mailables today. The reason is there is one good point which we should add inside the sign up and the login process, or any form submission process, because when the form is getting submitted and we get some errors, the user is not able to see those errors, right? So it would be good if user see the error, he can resolve that issue. I mean, he can see that, okay, the mail was invalid, or let's say the credentials were invalid. So all these things should be displayed on the form, right? I'm not talking about the validation error. Remember, I'm not talking about the validation error. I'll execute, I'll run the process once and I'll show you. So for this, I need to run my server, PHP artisan serve. Okay. And we will go to the browser. Let's refresh this. Okay, we go to the login page. Now, if I submit it blank, it runs the validation, right? It's running the request validation. So at the validation failure, we have already added up the divs to show that error part. We have done the error handling. But let's suppose if I am submitting up some, let's say, email, jaswinder@test.com, and I'm putting a wrong password. Okay. So the email field is required, I have filled it. Password field is required, I have filled it. Email should exist, yes, I have like requested the existing email only. So now the problem is my password might be wrong. Okay, so if the password is wrong, it will redirect back to the login page only. That is what the logic we have already written. But when it redirects back to the login page, we do not see any error over here, right? We do not see any error. So I want to show the error, that if on submission of the form there is any issue, any problem at the server side, or the authentication process is not done, so it should redirect and show the proper error message. Now, how to do this thing? We will whenever you are submitting up a request, right? Whenever you are submitting up a request, a session is being generated, right? A session is being generated. So that session is like a limited duration time. Okay, session is a limited duration time. It has a start time, it has an end time. So when the request is submitted, a session is being created, and that session can be like the data can be put into the session and retrieved from the session. Okay. Now remember, session will not remain for lifelong. The session, as I said, has a limited time. For example, I'm going to log in, I'm going to log out. That is one session. Okay, application creates a session duration of login and logout. I'm requesting a guest session would be created, right? Now, sometimes people get confused that session means only when you are going to log in. But it is that when you make a request, the application creates a guest session kind of thing also. So here we are going to make a request, and when the error occurs, I'll push the information to the session, right? But let's go into a bit more information about the sessions, right? Okay. Now, when I say that I have to handle the sessions, Laravel has beautifully done it. Okay. And it is telling that, okay, if you want to handle the session or you want to maintain the session, you can maintain it with different drivers, right? If you are writing up a basic application, you can save the session inside the file, or you can save the session inside the cookies, or you can go and save the session inside the database. Like let's suppose if your application is extensive, large, and you want the information to be saved inside the database and you want to persist it, right? So you can use the database for saving it. You have to create a table and all the information related to the session, what is the data you are saving inside the session, will go to the database. My application needs to be very fast. Suppose I'm creating up a big, large scale application and I want the application should be super fast. So in that case, I can use a in-memory database, right? Like Redis. So databases, a relational database will be obviously on your disk, right? But if I talk about the Redis, it is an in-memory database. It is faster than the normal SQL databases. Or you can go for a DynamoDB, which is a service provided by AWS. Or we can save the information inside an array. Again, it would be in memory, but it will not be persisted, right? In the case of Redis, it gets persisted. The loading part will be done inside the memory only. Okay, so these are the different drivers. Now let's suppose if I want to set the driver or I want to make the changes in the configuration of session, how can I do that? So let's go to the environment file and look over here. We have a session driver. I'll keep one more I'll make one more video because I'm seeing session and session again. I'll keep one more session on session. That's a bit confusing. So I'll make one more video on this topic session where we will go for the advanced part of the sessions, right? So here I'm discussing that how can I, what driver currently it is running, and if I want to make select a different driver, how can I proceed with that? So the current driver which it is using is file. Suppose I want to go for the database. I want to save all the information inside the database. I want to save all the session information inside the database. But there should be a table inside the database, right, to save this information. Now, if you require a database, that means you need to think about what will be the schema, what will be the column names, how many columns would I require, how will I keep the key and value pairs. So we don't have to worry about this because the database handling, the session driver is being provided by Laravel that, okay, you can use the database. So they have already defined the schema part for that. Okay, and how can we check this? How can we create that table? If the table is already created, how can we go and create the table? So in this case, we can run a command php artisan session table and then we can migrate, right? So what actually will happen? This command session table will create a migration which is predefined. Let's try to run this command. php artisan session table. Migration is created. So where is this migration? Actually, the migration was kept inside the packages, the vendor folder, Laravel packages or some other library packages. And now when we executed this command, it would have published it. It would have published it to our migration folder. So go to the database migration, check it over here, sessions. So now it is having a string ID, foreign ID for user, string IP address, and it is nullable C. That's why I was saying that there can be a guest session also. So IP address, user agent, long text, payload, and integer last activity. So now we can use database. Now we can use the database to save the information of the session, right? But I'll go for simple file only for now. Let the file hold all the session information. And now I want to retrieve the data from session. Retrieval or putting the data into the session. I want to keep the data into the session. See, it is handy. Sometimes when the user logins, you keep some information inside the session, or you want to keep some information handy which is required by user and you don't want to fetch it again from database. For example, let's say the profile of user. I'm going to keep some information of the profile of user inside the session only. Or if he is selecting up some products to purchase in an e-commerce application, if he's if you are developing up an e-commerce application and you want that user can select some products, right? I can put it inside the session. and later on I can persist it into the database once the user logins, or any means I can persist the data. So now putting and retrieving the data from the session can be done with two things: session helper and request instance. This is actually, helper is a method. There are helper methods. Helper methods are the methods for which you may not require any instance to be created. They are methods and you can pass data, you can use them. They are already created by PHP and Laravel, and you can use it in your development. And second option is request instance. So we can use the request object, and with that object we can go and call the session, and with that session instance we can push the data, put the data, get the data. Okay, now let's see quickly the methods and then we will implement them in our program. So session helper method, you have a session method and you are passing the key to it. Okay, so now it will look that whether there is any value saved for this key. If yes, if the key is existing, it will return you the value. Okay, if I want to specify a default value, for example, if the key is existing, if the key is not existing and I want a default value, so I can pass it as a second parameter, right? Or I can store some data. See, this part is for getting the data. Okay, and this one is to store the data inside the session. It's like, you can think of that this is only storing the data. Once the session is closed, it would be cleaned off, right? So don't think that, okay, after few months if you come back and you will get the same data. Possibly not, because session would be timeout, session would be destroyed, right? So session key and value pair is given. Now if I want to use the request instance, I can call the request object, call the session method, put the value with key and value, and one more method is there, push. Okay, suppose you are saving the data inside an array and you want to make the you want to add a new key to that array. So user would be my key, or user would be the array, and inside that this is the key, right? User.teams. And I have one more method, flash, very important. This is actually the one which we are going to use. Flash is the information being pushed to the session only for the next request. Okay, only for the next request means that next request is completed, it is removed. If I put a data inside the session, probably I have to go and remove it as well. So you have to take care while putting the data inside the session, and whether that data would be need to be kept for a long period, or I have to remove it on the next request. So if I have to remove it on the next request, I'll not use put, I'll go for flash. If I'm using put, then I have to remove it also. Okay, so I'll go for the flash method. Now let's go back to our project and implement this thing. So I'll demo it with login controller. Okay, I'll go to the login controller, and this is the part where we were checking that whether the credentials are correct or not, and it was redirecting back with the input. Input is not getting populated. I'll come back to later. Session, we'll go for the session only. So flash the message to session. Okay, so let's write up $request session method and flash. Okay, so now I have to provide a key. Remember, ensure that the key should be very unique. So here I can say error underscore, let's say status. Okay, I'm going to write it as status, and let's give some message, and the message would be invalid credentials. Okay, so now this message would be flashed by this key inside the session. Okay, and you can fetch it back using this key status. Now where should we fetch it? Where are we going to fetch it? We are going to fetch it inside our login form. So let's go to the login.blade. Okay, here we'll fetch it. Yeah, this is the form, and above this I'm going to check whether my session is having an error or not. And if, and here we are going to write session. Now because I will not take the request object over here, and this is a good practice, don't bring the request object over here, right? So in this case, now we will say session helper, and in the session helper I'll try to get the value that is saved by the name status, by the key status, and I'll put it inside a variable $status. Right, now this if condition will work if the session status value is not null, right? If it is not null, then only it is going to execute. And here let's put up a div alert, right? We are going to add a div alert. So I'm going for the bootstrap again, bootstrap alert. Right, I want to show this alert. I'm not going to segregate based on the warning, danger, success, secondary, primary, right? I'm going to keep it very simple. I'll take one, let's put the blue one, the default one. Okay, primary alert. And for this I need to copy this, put it over here. Okay, and I need to show the data. So $status. Now important point is that this is alert should not display when the user is coming first time on the login page, right? And that's the reason why I have added the if condition, but we'll verify it. We'll quickly verify this. So let's go to the login page, and here at the top title is coming as register, bit confusing. Change it to login. Okay, refresh. Fine, I'm refreshing the page and I don't see that alert right now. I'm going to enter some data which is existing and with a wrong password. So click on login, and here it is printing up the invalid credentials. Right, now we can use some jQuery to hide this after like few seconds, because if you're not going to hide it, the request is completed, the session is cleaned up, and remember this message will not displayed again if I'm going to refresh this page. But it would be good if we are going to put some jQuery so that this bar can alert bar can get hidden after 3 or 4 seconds. So we can implement that with the jQuery, right? Okay, so now we see this session where it is if the error is generated, we can pass the information to the session, we can flash the message to the session, and then I can display that message on the front end, right? So that's all for today's class. We have gone through like basic idea of session, that what is a session, how can we create the session, and how can we push the message to the session. This video would be uploaded shortly, and I would request everyone to share it with all your friends, colleagues. Thank you everyone.